Josh or Joshua, which do you prefer?
Josh was fine.
Okay. So I'm with Joshua Zeman, filmmaker for Checkpoint Zoo. Just quick question on the logistics. Getting into Kharkiv, was it, I'm sure, must have been a whole different film altogether. What was that experience like and how frustrating was it? I guess in lay terms, considering what's going on, that wasn't such a big deal, but maybe can you just walk us through the whole logistics?
No, Greg, I think that's actually an excellent question, to be honest with you, and very relevant. As a filmmaker and making a lot of films, there's always like a kind of what's always going to be hard. But I have to say, getting to Ukraine was very difficult. You have to fly into Warsaw. You then drive down to the border. And what's interesting is that we had to get somebody to pick us up, but it couldn't be a man because the men are under conscription, theoretically. So a woman had to come pick us up and then drive us across the border. Of course, we had to get press passes. Getting press passes. Of course, Ukraine wants as many people to talk about what they're doing and cover it, but it's still not easy to get press passes. When we were going from the border from Poland to Ukraine, we were there for 7 hours, 8 hours. People were, what are you doing? Why are you bringing this equipment in? And we're like, we're going to tell a story. And they're like, oh, really? What story? And we're like, we're going to a zoo in Kharkiv. And they were like, they couldn't quite believe it. It took a long time. There's the overnight flight from New York. Then there's driving down. There's almost like you have to be at the border at 4 a.m. to try and get across. And then what most people don't understand about Ukraine is it's literally the size of New York to Chicago. It is a large country. So to drive across Ukraine takes a full day and then some. Of course, there's checkpoints along the way. So it takes a while to get there. It takes a good 2 to 3 days to get there. And then you tell your story and then you get home. And of course, what many people don't also understand, and I think this is worthwhile for the production folks out there, the insurance. You can't get regular insurance to go to Ukraine to cover yourself or to cover your director of photography or your crew. You have to get special insurance. Now, CNN and all these other folks, they have special insurance, but for an independent filmmaker, it was a crazy amount of money, the amount of insurance. And the insurance, you have to get it through Lloyd's of London because it's so risky. And the insurance, the price is based upon what areas you go to. So if you're really going to a hot zone, it's way more money. And so it's quite a big deal.
I don't know if this is a ridiculous question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. As a journalist and a filmmaker, you're going out and you and your crew, you're not going into a safe space as far as reporting. Could you relate to people who are going not into a safe space as opposed to leaving their city and going into a zoo to save animals? Did you find some kind of relatability as far as people going outside their own comfort zone and realizing there are repercussions to whatever good deed they want to do?
Another very good question, actually, because when I went there, everybody's like, are you scared? And I was like, no, we're covering animals. We're covering a story about people saving animals. So you felt that you were doing, for lack of a better term, God's work, if you want to call it that. And so nothing was going to happen to us because we were doing this. And the exact same was these people saving these animals from a zoo. You always have to be motivated by what you do, whether it's for your country, your homeland, or what have you. And the motivation is what makes you a better fighter. That's why you have those speeches, those big rousing speeches before people go into battle. But when these people were fighting for animals, creatures who don't care about borders or boundaries or peace treaties or weapons or any of that stuff, they're innocent. And so I think it gave these people this unbelievable motivation to actually complete this mission impossible, to rescue 4,750 animals from a war zone while bombs are literally falling on top of them while they're doing this. And I felt a little bit of that as well. I didn't feel scared at all. The only time I actually felt scared was when I got home, because I had stayed twice, actually, because I went to Ukraine twice, in a wonderful hotel in Kharkiv. And when I got home, I got a message about 3 or 4 weeks later. That specific hotel had been completely destroyed by a missile. And it wasn't random. So I think as Americans, we always have this feeling like if something happens, you're going to yell, I'm American. And everybody's, can't kill this person there. That'll become an international incident. But then I realized that No, that was actually the point. Putin or whoever wanted to intentionally destroy this hotel because that's where journalists were staying, journalists, mostly foreign journalists, who would then cover the story and bring the story back to their country.
Joshua, when other journalists ask you this question, and it's an age-old question that people, yeah, maybe even if you're just an amateur or you're someone as veteran as yourself, are maybe asking yourself every day or maybe quite a bit, is what happens when you as a journalist get possibly personally involved with the subject? Meaning, when you see loss of life or loss in front of you, you and your crew are documenting it, and you're talking about at the beginning of the interview about telling a story. So you have a job as a journalist, but you also have a job as a human being because you're processing what's going. How does how do you deal as an expert in regarding the blurring the line? There's even a section in your documentary when I think one of the volunteers says, "Stop shooting, help me with this animal." So what's
Mm-hmm.
that? I know what the line is, but how does one navigate with that line?
I'll be honest, Greg, I don't even know what the line is anymore. There's that famous story about one of the I talk about all the time, the band club, the photographers, I think is Kevin Williams, the picture of,
Yeah.
and for those who don't know, it's this picture of a child starving and there's a vulture behind the child. And the child, head down, it's emaciated. And there was this big, when that won a Pulitzer, because this vulture is like looming behind this starving child, and whether or not the journalist put the camera down and then saved the child. And so did he take the picture first or did he save the child first? And that really, I think, has become, do you get the story and then do the work? Is the saving in the storytelling? That's the other part of it. You can't help but be involved. You should be involved. We are humans. Okay. The question just becomes, is the story that you're telling fake or not? Are you giving real facts? You could be involved as long as you adhere to the facts. So I think that's really the issue. We see a lot of blurring the lines between fair and opinionated or not. And I understand that. As long as it's factual, then I think you can blur those lines. And I have no problem with that. That's always been a big issue for me. But by telling the story, you are helping. But if a guy says, help me lift this lion into a truck, put down the camera, absolutely.
100%, yes. Just also regarding Checkpoint 2, what was the key for you as being a leader of the crew and making sure, or in general, the key to collaboration? I see on your IMDb, you have a bunch of editors. There's so many things at play. Also, your subjects, I'm assuming, have to build a bond with them. But as an individual, what has really shaped you as far as being an effective, not just director, but as an effective communicator in all of these departments that you're dealing with?
I think I'm always learning how to be a better communicator. I think we always are. I started out in the industry as an assistant director. So the assistant director basically goes around and he tries to at least make sure that all the materials that the director needs are going to be at his disposal, that the crew is there and the camera's rolling and everything. So I learned how to communicate. And I think it's interesting. You need, as a director, to communicate. Sometimes some directors don't like that. Like they want to be in their moment. They want to be in their head. But the better communicator that you can be of your vision to everybody, the better it is going to turn out. Sure, you also have to, you can't walk everybody, you can't hold everybody's hand. They still have to anticipate and they still have to understand and they still have to figure things out for themselves. But I think a big key to being a good director is being a good communicator, but also communicating the right information, right? Because people can only take so much. So you got to give them the right information at the right moment. And you need to keep some stuff for yourself too. Everybody doesn't need to know, like, this is for English language audiences, or this is for Ukrainian language audiences. There's some stuff that you're just processing in your mind, but communication is key.
Then on being in your own head and processing in your mind, I don't, maybe I haven't looked too far into this, but just the effective writing in a documentary, what does that mean in layman's terms? What are we as the viewers not understanding regarding what it takes to write a documentary?
But you ask very good questions, Greg, because that is a real issue. Some people don't, it's a documentary. How can it be written? I think what we're really talking about is editing. We're talking about a form of editing. And I think a lot of times, as great as a director is in terms of overall vision, when it comes to a documentary, an editor is really key. You must have a great editor. And that is why so many of us documentarians, as great as a director of photography is, etc., if we don't have that great editor, it's just not going to work, because documentary, the cooking of the film happens afterwards. Almost in a narrative, the cooking of the film, the actors and everything happens before, during shooting. But in a documentary, it happens afterwards. And so the editor really is so important. And therefore, some of that skill set gets transferred over into writing. Sometimes that's VO. A lot of times it's more VO than anything as a writing person on a documentary.
Joshua, for when I edit my podcast and my interviews, I run now. I used to spend hours editing ums and uhs and cuts and whatnot. And I think you know where this question's going. But now with AI software, I can run it through, and then with a click of a button, I can just save maybe 2 to 3 hours of work. And I'm still it really helps my personal workflow as a person who's editing podcasts. But I want to know someone who's directed. You're a director of acclaimed documentaries, and you're a veteran. You're also a journalist. How have you used possibly or implemented AI in your work? Will you do so? And do you see it, I guess, if used properly in balanced form, can that enhance what you do, or maybe not, because what you do is a completely different world than some podcasts are editing some audio to release to Apple Podcasts?
Yeah, but it's a very touchy subject. I get it. First of all, I think it goes back to the larger question of what is truth, right? There's some people that think AI is fake truth, right? I also don't think those people really understand what AI should be used for. It should be used for the grunt work. It should be used to take out the ums and the ahs that you would normally do. So you can spend hours taking out the uhs and the ahs, which I would do anyway. Or if the computer can take out the ums and the ahs, that's fine. I don't see any problem with that. That is important. Also, I don't speak any Ukrainian. I wish I did, but I don't. So when I come home after shooting with hundreds of hours of footage, I need some way to translate that footage. So if I can use AI as a translation tool, that would be great. Now I can't trust AI. I still have to go back and check all the work and make sure at the end of the day, I still have to bring the human in and say, is this really what's being said here? Or what am I missing? Or there's something. So I don't seem to have a problem with it, but I understand if we're like having people like our subject matters say things that they don't say. That you can't do. You can't have Anthony Bourdain say something that he didn't say. But in using it to speed up a process of real grunt work, I think it's fine. Yeah. Oh, and for example, so I do podcasts as well. And I type in everything of the script, and then I have an AI voice, which is theoretically my voice, but it doesn't really sound like it. And then the AI voice comes back, and I listen to it, and I think that's too long. Now, then I re-record it. So is that a bad use? That's a good use of AI. I think the question is just, are you changing the intent, or are you just doing grunt work?
You mentioned a phrase, when you come home. There's something to be said when you come home with maybe a couple of hours of footage, but when you come home and you have hundreds of hours of footage and you're assembling something, what is home like? Do you ever get to leave that home when you're so immersed in what you're how do you find your sanity amidst all of the work you're doing? Yeah.
This is not for you. It's just, this is not about you. You're just a vessel. You were lucky enough that these folks allowed you to tell their story. That's it. That's all it is. And so you come home, you realize that it's not about you. It's not about anything. It has nothing to do with you. You're a vessel, and your job, your mission, you have been chosen for some God's grace. I keep saying God, but I'm also somewhat of an atheist. You have been chosen to do this. So do it.
Final couple of questions. Did you always have that mindset? Because I feel like I'm maturing when I get older, and maybe my initial foray into what I do was maybe egocentric, or maybe can you just talk about that maturation and how deep is your work now because you're coming from that place possibly?
Yeah, you definitely mature as a filmmaker. You mature I think the ego is an important thing, right? Some people, it also depends on your level of success, but you mature as you get older. You realize things aren't about you. You realize, especially in the film industry, you get rejected 9 million times. That's wonderful for your ego because you realize it becomes so less about you. So that helps. Shooting people in war-torn countries and watching their lives be destroyed by a missile shooting from the sky, random, completely random. My kid the other day was like, why does this happen to me? And I was like, I don't know. It's like, your life isn't so bad. So yeah, I think this is a part of maturing, part of the maturity in general, but also part of a creative maturity that I think is important and that we get. And especially depending on the subjects that you choose. I did another movie, The Loneliest Whale. When you look at yourself in comparison to a whale, you are nothing. We are not the greatest species in comparison to a whale. So it's humbling. The film business is humbling as well. Documentaries are a humbling experience for sure.
Final question for cinephiles, documentary fans, after they see and love Checkpoint Zoo, could you please maybe direct them to another documentary that you did for them to watch? What should their next step be and why? Maybe they should go a linear path with your first doc, but where would you like these cinephiles and documentary enthusiasts to go regarding your work next?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I bounce back and forth between true crime and animals. It's a palate cleanser. Sometimes you just need to do something different. I like mysteries. I like solving mysteries. I like investigative stories, but I also like the mysteries of the animal world as well. And some things we can't answer about whales, or that innate interconnection we have with animals that transcends speech and even our thinking, because we don't know what they're thinking. So I like all that. So it's really hard to say. Some people are like, why do you do true crime? People could go back to The Killing Season, which is pretty interesting investigation into a serial killer case that I did that was really about corruption. They can go to Murder Mountain. A lot of people like that. That's on Netflix, about the weed industry in Humboldt County, which was in some ways just as dangerous as Ukraine. So yeah, all those things are interesting.
Thanks again for your time. And you, as the young cinephile, can you name a documentary that, I ask this question a lot, and a lot of documentarians always point to Errol Morris. I'm wondering where you point to.
No.
Where do you point to personally when you were young, and maybe a documentary maybe shaped you as a journalist and a filmmaker? And thanks again for your time.
Yeah, of course. I think that was probably Paradise Lost.
I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, Paradise Lost, Joe Berlinger. It was the first time. It was a crime story, and it used music, but it also showed a little bit of that interesting line between the fourth wall, filmmakers' involvement. That also gets into Eileen Warmos, Portrait of a Serial Killer. I was always interested in that line between the filmmaker and the subject, because it's such a prickly line, because it's so hard not to cross. So that was very important for me.
Great. Joshua, again, thanks again for your time. Really love Checkpoint Zoo, and good luck with this documentary, and looking forward to interviewing you for your next one.
Thank you. And of course, we'd love it if people can go to checkpointzoo.com. If people really could watch the trailer, please come to a screening. If you know somebody who loves animals, wants to see a movie that really gets into that experience of saving animals, you can buy tickets through checkpointzoo.com. So please share that with your friends and family.
All right. Thanks again. You take care.
Thanks, Greg. Take care.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this video. For more movie and television reviews and interviews, please subscribe to my Deepest Dream channel. Like, comment, share, subscribe. And as always, thanks so much for your support. Take care.